The note wasn't supposed to exist. It was tucked inside a plain, unmarked envelope, his handwriting shaky but unmistakable. I can't do this anymore. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Sarah stared at it, heart pounding, mind reeling. What couldn't he do? Before she could read further, the front door creaked open. Elizabeth walked in. Without a word, she snatched the letter from Sarah's trembling hands and tossed it into the fireplace. It's best you forget it, the older woman murmured, not even meeting her eyes. But Sarah couldn't. Because her husband had said he'd only be gone for a few hours. That was 3 weeks ago. Morning light streamed through the kitchen window of the Johnson home, casting a warm glow across the worn oak table where Sarah sat with her second cup of coffee. 30 years in this house had engraved memories into every corner, moments of joy, hardship, and everything in between. She watched as her husband of 3 decades, Michael, moved briskly around the room, patting his pockets in search of his keys and wallet. Just heading out for a few hours, honey, he said, planting a quick kiss on her cheek. Mom called. Said she needs help with the filing cabinet again. Sarah nodded, though a familiar heaviness stirred in her stomach. Of course. Elizabeth needs you, again. She kept her tone even, but after 30 years, the routine felt painfully predictable. Michael paused, his shoulders tightening just slightly. She's 82, Sarah. What do you want me to do? Hire someone when I can handle it myself? I just thought we might finally get to the garden today. She ran her hand over the table's surface, tracing the faint outline of a water ring with her fingertip. We've been planning it for weeks. I'll be back before dinner, he said, softening his tone. We'll plant those hydrangeas you picked out. Mom won't take more than a couple of hours. After he left and the door clicked shut behind him, Sarah's gaze drifted to the sideboard, where a framed photo from their wedding day stood in quiet display. They looked so young in it, faces glowing with hope, the promise of a future they hadn't yet lived. Beside them stood Elizabeth, her arm looped possessively through Michael's, her smile tight and unmoving around the eyes. That was who Elizabeth Johnson was, polished on the outside, perfectly composed. A concerned mother, a doting grandmother, and, when it suited her, a fragile widow in need of her son's help. But Sarah had come to recognize the pattern, the uncanny timing of Elizabeth's so-called emergencies. They always seemed to arrive just when Sarah and Michael made plans of their own. Her phone buzzed with a text from their daughter, Jennifer. How's the garden? Send me a picture when it's done. Sarah exhaled and typed back, delayed. Grandma Elizabeth needs Dad. Again. Jennifer's reply came within seconds. Mom, you've been saying that for 30 years. When are you finally going to stand up to her? The words hit her harder than she expected, because they were true. For 3 decades, Sarah had played the understanding wife, the peacemaker, the one who stepped back. She had believed that patience would win in the end, that one day Elizabeth would stop seeing her as competition and start seeing her as family. Sarah moved to the window and looked out at the flower bed, where the hydrangeas waited to be planted. In the midday sun, their blue petals were already starting to wilt. Just like her hope for today, and so many days before. She didn't know it then, but this ordinary Saturday would be the last time she'd see her husband for months. She didn't know that the carefully constructed facade of their home life was about to collapse. By the time the sun had set, Sarah's text messages remained unread. Her calls went straight to voicemail. The hydrangeas never made it into the ground, their petals now completely wilted. Michael, it's me again. It's almost 9. Please call me. Her voice trembled slightly as she left the 4th message of the day. Just as she began to consider calling the police, headlights swept across the driveway. Sarah rushed to the door, a wave of relief rising in her chest. But it was only Elizabeth. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, her perfume trailing heavily behind her. "Sarah," she said, her tone laced with concern, her face drawn tight. "Michael isn't back yet? That's strange. He left my house hours ago, around 2. A cold weight sank in Sarah's stomach. "He never came home. I thought he might still be with you." "Oh dear," Elizabeth murmured, fingers brushing the strand of pearls around her neck. The same pearls Michael had given her last Christmas. Far more extravagant than the simple silver bracelet he'd given Sarah. "Did you try calling the hospital? You know how he loses track of time when he's helping someone." There was something in her tone, an edge just beneath the surface. As if Sarah were overreacting. As if she should be used to her husband's absences by now. "He always answers his phone," Sarah said firmly, her eyes locked on Elizabeth's face. Did something flicker behind Elizabeth's carefully composed expression, an instant of irritation, perhaps, too quick to name? "Well, I'm sure he'll turn up," she said, lowering herself onto the sofa and smoothing her skirt with precision. "Anyway, I wanted to talk about Thanksgiving. I think we should host it at my place this year. Your table's always a bit cramped." Sarah stared at her in disbelief. Her husband was missing, and Elizabeth wanted to discuss holiday seating arrangements? "Elizabeth, this really isn't the time. Don't be ridiculous," the older woman said, waving her hand dismissively. "Worrying won't bring him home any faster. Now, about the turkey. I think we should order from Caldwell's this year. Yours was a bit dry last time, don't you think?" For a split second, Sarah thought she saw something beneath Elizabeth's mask of concern. Something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. As if Michael's disappearance, while inconvenient, had also created a convenient opening. That night, after Elizabeth finally left, Sarah called Jennifer. "Mom, call the police," her daughter insisted. "This isn't like Dad at all." "Your grandmother doesn't seem worried," Sarah replied, but it sounded more like she was trying to convince herself than anyone else. "Since when is Grandma Elizabeth the standard for normal behavior?" Jennifer shot back, her voice sharp. "Mom, listen to me. Something's wrong. Just once, trust your instincts. Trust your instincts." 3 simple words that would change everything. That night, Sarah's eyes landed on the small wooden box atop her nightstand, the one where she kept her wedding ring. Beside it lay Michael's watch, a vintage Omega that had once belonged to his father. He never went anywhere without it. Unless. She picked it up, rolling the cool weight in her palm. Engraved on the back were the words, "Time reveals all truth." And in that moment, a cold fear settled in her chest. If Michael had really planned to return in just a few hours, why had he left behind the one possession he valued above all others? 3 weeks passed, and there was still no sign of Michael. The police investigation had turned up nothing, no unusual activity on his credit cards, no recent phone calls, no eyewitness accounts. All they had was a man who walked out of his elderly mother's home and vanished. "Mrs. Johnson," the detective had said gently during their final meeting, "people walk away from their lives more often than you think. Sometimes, without leaving a single explanation." "Not Michael," Sarah insisted. "Not without his watch." The detective gave her a look she'd grown familiar with, sympathetic, but filled with quiet doubt. She had seen that look before, on the faces of neighbors and friends. The unspoken theory lingered in the air. She must have missed something. Their marriage must not have been as solid as she claimed. Michael had simply walked away. Only Jennifer seemed to believe her without question. And strangely enough, so did their neighbor Howard, a retired English professor who had spent decades quietly observing their lives from across the street. "That boy never made a move without his mother's approval," he said one evening as they sat on his porch. "Women like Elizabeth don't give up control overnight." If Michael's gone, she knows more than she's saying. Meanwhile, Elizabeth had undergone a quiet transformation, from concerned mother to grieving matriarch. She appeared on the local news, voice quivering with emotion, organizing search parties, positioning herself at the center of the tragedy. And all the while, she subtly chipped away at Sarah's credibility. Poor Sarah, she told anyone who would listen. I've been so worried about her memory lately. She honestly thinks Michael was happy in that marriage. The breaking point came on what should have been their 31st wedding anniversary. When Sarah walked into the house, she froze in the doorway. Elizabeth was in the kitchen, sorting through Michael's belongings into 2 large boxes labeled donate and storage. What are you doing? Sarah's voice barely rose above a whisper. Elizabeth barely looked up. It's been nearly a month, dear. We have to be realistic. Michael wouldn't want you living in some kind of shrine. This is my house. Those are my husband's things. Well, Elizabeth sighed theatrically, technically, half of this house belongs to Michael. And as his mother, his only blood relative. Get out. The words surfaced from somewhere deep inside Sarah, a place that had been silent for 30 years. Elizabeth's eyes widened, feigning hurt. I'm just trying to help you move on. No, Sarah said, stepping forward, her voice now steady and sharp. You're trying to erase him from here. Just like you've spent 30 years trying to erase me from his life. Don't be ridiculous. Where is he, Elizabeth? Sarah's hands were trembling now. What did you do? The older woman's expression hardened. The mask of concern slipped away like a discarded costume. I have no idea what you're talking about, but clearly you're not well. Perhaps it's time you considered getting help. She paused, her tone calculated. I've already spoken with the children about my concerns regarding your mental state. What? Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Jennifer agrees that you've been struggling to cope, Elizabeth said, offering a thin, victorious smile. We're just exploring what would be best for you going forward. It was a lie, Sarah knew Jennifer would never betray her like that. But the deliberate cruelty, the groundwork Elizabeth had laid to undermine her, left her reeling. Get out of my house, Sarah whispered. This won't end well for you, Elizabeth said as she reached for her designer handbag. You've never been strong enough to stand on your own. Michael knew that. After she left, Sarah collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table. Her eyes landed on something half buried in the donation box, Michael's old leather-bound journal, the one he'd faithfully written in for years. She had always respected his privacy, never once opening it during their marriage. But now, with trembling hands, she flipped to the final entry, dated the day before he disappeared. Mom says she's found a buyer for the lake property. I haven't told Sarah yet, she loves that place too much. It's where we planned our retirement, where we dreamed we'd grow old together. But Mom insists the market won't get any better. She's already arranged everything. She says once the papers are signed, she'll help me break the news to Sarah. Just a few signatures tomorrow and it'll be done. God forgive my cowardice. Sarah stared at the page, her eyes drawn to the number scrawled in the corner, 243. Her mind raced to the lake property, 10 acres of forest and a small cabin Michael had inherited from his grandfather. Their dream. The place they were supposed to renovate together once he retired next year. According to the journal, Elizabeth had somehow pressured him into selling it behind her back. With her heart pounding, Sarah reached for the phone and called the county records office. It's confirmed, the deed was transferred, Jennifer said 2 days later, sliding the property records across the kitchen table. Dad didn't sell the lake property to a third-party buyer. He transferred it directly to Grandma Elizabeth. And a week later, she sold it, at nearly double the value. Sarah stared at the documents, her eyes landing on Michael's familiar signature. But why would he do that? And where did the money go? Jennifer, who had inherited her father's head for numbers, had spent hours tracing the financial trail. The proceeds were deposited into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. A joint account, with both their names on it. That can't be, Sarah whispered. Michael would never hide money. He was the most transparent man I've ever known. He probably didn't do it willingly, Jennifer said gently. Mom, I looked into Grandma's finances too. She's nearly bankrupt. 2 mortgages on the house, massive credit card debt, and just about everything she owns is leveraged. The puzzle pieces began to click into place. Elizabeth's desperate financial situation. The lakeside land worth nearly $1 million. Michael's hesitation and guilt. She coerced him, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. She manipulated him into doing this. But still, why disappear? Where was he now? The answer came from an unexpected source. That evening, their neighbor Howard called. I didn't think much of it at the time, he explained, but I saw Michael the day he disappeared. He was at the downtown bus station. I was picking up my nephew when I spotted him. But something was off. He didn't look like himself. I called out to him, but he turned his head away quickly. Maybe he didn't hear me, or maybe he didn't want to. The bus station? Sarah's thoughts spun. Did you see where he was going? No, but he was carrying that old duffel bag, the green canvas one he takes on fishing trips. I figured maybe he was heading to the lake to meet some friends. The lake. Their lake. The next morning, Sarah drove 3 hours to what used to be their land. Construction had already begun. The little cabin was gone, demolished to make way for something far larger, the foundation already being cleared. Excuse me, she said, approaching one of the workers. I'm trying to find information about the previous owner, a man who sold this property recently. The foreman shook his head. Ma'am, we bought this place from an older woman, not a man. And let me tell you, she was something else. Tried to back out of the deal even after everything had been signed. Did she give a reason? Said her son changed his mind or something, the man replied with a shrug. But once the deed was transferred, it wasn't our concern. Sarah wandered along the property's boundary, each step stirring a memory. This place had been their dream. A quiet retreat by the water, where they would grow old together. And Elizabeth had stolen it. Just like she had stolen so many moments over the years. Near where the old boathouse used to stand, Sarah noticed something unusual. Fresh tire tracks leading into the woods, toward a part of the property rarely visited due to the thick underbrush. She followed them, pushing aside brambles and branches, until she came to a small clearing. There, partially covered by a weathered tarp, was a camper she instantly recognized. It was old and battered, a relic from the 70s. Michael had always talked about restoring it someday. And sitting beside a small campfire, staring into the flames, was her husband. As Sarah stepped closer, Michael looked up, his expression flooded with shame and disbelief. He was thinner, his beard unkempt, but it was undeniably him, alive, breathing, real. Sarah, he said, her name falling from his lips like a confession. For a moment, every question she had prepared, every rehearsed line, vanished from her mind. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. I found your journal, she said simply. Page 243. He flinched, as if struck. I never meant to hurt you, he murmured. It was Mom. I don't care what Elizabeth said, Sarah cut in, her voice clear and firm. I want to hear the truth from you. And so, beside a small fire on the land that used to be theirs, Michael finally told her everything. He spoke of how Elizabeth had manipulated him for years, weaving a web of emotional and financial dependence. How she used guilt like a lever, threatening to expose long-buried family secrets unless he followed her demands. She was about to lose the house, he explained. Her debt was out of control. She convinced me that selling the lake property was the only way to save her. But once that was done, she wanted more, the retirement account, even the house. When I said no, she threatened to tell you everything about the lake, to make it sound like it was all my idea. So you ran, Sarah said, not accusing, just stating the truth. Michael nodded, unable to meet her eyes. I couldn't face what I'd done to you. I couldn't face the choices she pushed me into. Between her and me. Even after 30 years, you still couldn't choose. Tears traced down the weathered lines of his face. I've been a coward my whole life, Sarah. Too weak to stand up to her, too afraid of losing one of you to protect the other. A twig snapped behind them. They turned to see Jennifer stepping out from between the trees, followed closely by Howard. I followed you, Jennifer said softly. I was worried. Howard scanned the scene with quiet comprehension. So, the prodigal son returns, hiding on his own land, he muttered. Michael looked from his daughter to his wife, his shoulders heavy with the weight of everything he hadn't said. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Jennifer crossed her arms. Did you know Grandma Elizabeth's been telling people Mom is mentally unstable? She's applying for guardianship. What? Michael's shock was unmistakable. She's using your disappearance to discredit Sarah, Howard explained. Says she's too stressed to manage her life. That's why we have to end this, Sarah said, her voice carrying new resolve. All of it. The secrets. The manipulation. The control. How? Michael asked, looking lost. By telling the truth, Sarah replied, rising to her feet and brushing off her jeans. Start with where you've been, and why. Then we go to the police, about the financial fraud. She'll fight it, Michael warned. She'll deny everything. Let her, Sarah said, reaching out her hand to him. But this time, we stand together. Howard cleared his throat. I think I can help there. I've been documenting her comings and goings for years, old neighborhood watch habits. And Sarah, I installed a camera on your front porch months ago. It's picked up some interesting conversations. You've been watching us? Michael asked, stunned. The older man shrugged. You live across from a master manipulator for 20 years, you learn to pay attention. I've seen the real her, when she thought no one was watching. 3 days later, Elizabeth arrived at Sarah's house, fully expecting another opportunity to apply pressure. But instead, she walked into a kitchen where Michael sat at the table. Surrounded by Sarah, Jennifer, Howard, and 2 detectives. Michael, she gasped, her expression expertly shifting from shock to tearful joy. My sweet boy. Where have you been? We've all been so worried. It's over, Mom, Michael said, his voice stronger than it had ever been. I know about the money. The lake property. Everything. Elizabeth's gaze darted from the detectives to Sarah, and her face hardened. I don't know what lies she's been feeding you, but… Mrs. Johnson, one of the detectives interrupted. We have full documentation of the property transfer and offshore accounts. Your son has provided a detailed statement of coercion. And we have evidence that you attempted to obtain legal guardianship under false pretenses. You can't prove anything, Elizabeth hissed. The mask of the concerned mother slipping completely away. It's my word against hers. A woman abandoned by her husband. Clearly unstable. Actually, Howard said, stepping forward. I have my own statement, and this. He placed a flash drive on the table. Security footage. 5 years worth. Every conversation you had on Sarah's porch, including the one last month. where you threatened to ruin her unless she signed over the house. For the first time in 30 years, Sarah saw Elizabeth Johnson rendered speechless. The careful facade crumbling before her eyes. You've controlled and manipulated this family for decades, Sarah said quietly. You nearly destroyed your son's marriage, his peace of mind, his self-worth. All for money. All for power. Elizabeth turned to Michael, desperation flickering in her eyes. You're really going to let them do this to your mother? After everything I sacrificed for you? But Michael stood firm beside Sarah and took her hand. No more sacrifices, Mom. No more control. This ends now. As the detectives led Elizabeth away, Sarah felt the weight of 30 years lift from her shoulders. The burden of always being second. Of never being enough. Of fighting a silent war for the soul of her own marriage. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, Michael said, watching the patrol car disappear down the street. I don't even know if I deserve it. Sarah looked at him, this flawed, fragile man who had finally found the courage to stand for their life together. Forgiveness might take time, she said. But for the first time, we finally have it. Time that belongs to us. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the porch of a small cabin overlooking a different lake. Not the one they had lost, this one was smaller, simpler, but it was entirely theirs. After Elizabeth's arrest for financial fraud, much of the stolen money had been recovered. Not all of it, but enough to begin again. This time, Michael had insisted that everything be put in Sarah's name. A gesture that meant more than the property itself. Their marriage hadn't magically healed overnight. There were still hard days, therapy sessions that unearthed painful truths. And moments when the weight of 30 years of manipulation threatened to pull them back under. But there were good days too. The day they planted hydrangeas along the new cabin path. The day they sat by the water and talked honestly about the past. And what the future might still hold. Jennifer visited often with the kids, who loved exploring the woods and learning to fish with their grandfather. Even Howard stopped by now and then, claiming the country air helped his arthritis. But mostly to offer his dry observations and unexpected wisdom. That evening, as the sunset painted the lake in gold and pink, Michael stepped onto the porch with 2 mugs of coffee and joined Sarah. I heard from the lawyer today, he said, settling into the chair beside her. Mom's request for early release was denied. Sarah nodded, not with triumph, but with quiet relief. Elizabeth would serve out her full 2-year sentence. And they would have that time to heal, untouched by her shadow. Do you regret it? Michael asked gently. Standing up to her? To me? Sarah watched a heron glide silently across the water. I regret waiting 30 years to find my voice, she said. But I don't regret using it once I did. She reached for the small wooden box beside her, the one that once held her wedding ring. Now it contained something else, a single key, labeled in her handwriting, Our Future. Jennifer brought something down from the attic today, she said, turning to him. Your old journals. The ones from when we first got married. Michael's expression tensed. And? You wrote that someday you wanted a workshop, she said, placing the box in his hands. To design furniture. To build something with your own hands. I think it's time. He opened the box, stared at the key, and then recognition dawned. The boathouse? It gets good light, she smiled. Jennifer and I cleaned it out yesterday. It's yours. A space for who you are now, and who you still want to become. Tears welled in Michael's eyes as he reached for her hand. After everything, you still believe I can be more than I was. I believe we both can, she said, squeezing his hand. That's what freedom is. As dusk settled around them, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. That finding her strength hadn't destroyed their marriage, it had saved it. That standing up for herself had given Michael the courage to stand too. Across the lake, lights twinkled from houses she didn't yet know. New neighbors. New beginnings. It's not perfect, Michael said, as if reading her thoughts. But it's ours. Sarah nodded, a deep peace settling in her chest. At last, she whispered. It's truly ours.